On September 19, 1972, in Springfield, New Jersey, a dalmatian trotted through the overgrown brush in the woods, returning home from a morning of scavenging. Clenched in its jowls, the canine proudly displayed its discovery, that of a badly decomposed human arm. It was then, shortly after, that patrolman Donald Schwartz received a call. A superintendent of a nearby apartment building had discovered the badly decayed arm deposited on the building's lawn. The Dalmatian had dropped it there before going back inside its owner's home. On the drive over, Officer Schwartz thought it was a prank call, or at the very most, an arm off a mannequin, intended to frighten whomever discovered it. But when the officer arrived on the scene, he could tell this wasn't a prank. This was a human arm. The officer's thoughts immediately went to the only person he believed it could be, 17-year-old Jeannette DePalma. Jeannette had been reported missing 6 weeks prior to this, but police had classified her as a runaway. The police borrowed a bloodhound and quickly took to the woods. The bloodhound soon led them to an abandoned quarry along Mountain View Road. There, they found the body, Jeannette DePalma, atop a bluff overlooking the quarry. Locals called the bluff Devil's Teeth, on account that the indentations in the cliffside formed what looked like teeth. Looking at Jeannette's corpse, it was clear that she had been there for a long time, long enough for her body to decay and for animals to start devouring it. She was lying face down in the leaves. She wore a blue t-shirt and tan slacks. They were the same clothes that she had last been seen wearing on the day of her disappearance. Around her body, investigators saw what they believed to be cult-related symbols. There were crosses made of twigs, branches outlined her body like a coffin, and rocks surrounded her head, as if almost forming a halo around her. Rumors quickly spread throughout the community that Jeannette had been sacrificed in a satanic ritual by a coven of witches. Because her body had deteriorated so much, Jeannette had to be identified by her dental records, and the pathologist was unable to determine her cause of death, though he placed a high probability on strangulation. In the coroner's report, it is simply labeled suspicious. In recent years, news media has begun to reevaluate and deconstruct the satanic panic, a bout of mass hysteria that afflicted the United States for over a decade. But what if it wasn't just hysteria? What if some of it was true? Ritual Rewind brings you into the darkest corners of the 1980s, uncovering the crimes, conspiracies, and occult fears that shaped a generation. Tonight, we rewind back to the 1970s and dive into the murders of 5 teenage girls in Union County, New Jersey. There were rumors of witchcraft, satanic cults, and serial killers. It's the case of the devil in Union County, and I'm your host, Drew, and you're listening to The Ritual Rewind. Jeannette DePalma's murder wasn't the first tragedy to befall this quaint and quiet community, and sadly, it wasn't going to be the last. Less than a year prior to Jeannette's disappearance, on November 9, 1971, in the nearby town of Westfield, only 3 miles from Jeannette, John List murdered his wife, mother, and 3 children in their home, meticulously arranged their bodies in the ballroom of their mansion, and then disappeared for almost 18 years. He left a letter addressed to his pastor and claimed that he had seen so much evil in the world that he killed his family in an attempt to ultimately save their souls. Prior to her death, John List's wife, Patricia, had begun to collect books on witchcraft, telling friends and neighbors that she belonged to a local coven of witches and practiced Satanism. Now, after the discovery of Jeannette's body in what was to be believed a ritual crime scene, some in the community wondered if the same coven that captured Patricia List could also be responsible for Jeannette's murder. Jeannette DePalma was born on August 3, 1956. She was the 6th child of a large Italian Catholic family. They lived in the affluent upper-middle-class neighborhood of Springfield, New Jersey. The family was considered odd. Neighbors noted that the family rarely left their home and seldom spoke to others outside their family. Many in the neighborhood were afraid of the DePalma family and believed that Mr. DePalma had associations with the mafia. One neighbor said he was a capo and a member of the Cosa Nostra. Police remember responding to numerous calls of domestic disturbances at the home. But when they arrived, Jeannette's mother would refuse to press charges and the police would leave. Nothing would ever come of the calls. But because of their parents' reputation in the community, the DePalma daughters were considered less refined and more on the sleazy side. Jeannette was often referred to as a wild child, which, back in those days, amounted mostly to hanging with boys and smoking marijuana. A local police officer recalls pulling Jeannette out of a few back seats of cars, but friends of Jeannette's called bullshit on those claims. To them, she was no different than any other teenager at the time. Sure, she may have smoked marijuana, but she was often in church and witnessing to her friends and neighbors about Jesus Christ. In the 1970s, an evangelical religious movement began to ferment within the counterculture community, blending the religion, spirituality, and folksiness that embodied the hippie movement. It earned them the moniker Jesus Freaks, and it originated in Orange County, California, and crossed the country with a fervor amongst the youth, eventually attracting the attention of Jeannette. She started attending the local Assemblies of God youth group, and then brought her family along. The DePalmas all soon renounced their Catholic faith and converted to evangelical Christianity. The Assemblies of God leaned more towards Pentecostal, so there was speaking in tongues, laying on hands, and public exorcisms. The Assemblies of God's pastor was Reverend James Tate, and he ended up being instrumental in drumming up much of the speculation around satanic sacrifice and devil worship. He theorized to reporters that the devil's disciples had killed Jeannette because of her faith. Jeannette would evangelize to both friends and strangers, and Reverend Tate believed that she had tried to lecture to devil worshippers about Christ, and they killed her for it. Jeannette went missing on August 7, 1972. That morning started off tumultuously. In an eerily ironic twist of history, Jeannette's parents had informed her that her cousin had run away from home and had been missing for over a month. Jeannette was infuriated and demanded to know why they had withheld this information from her for so long. But in her parents' defense, Jeannette's cousin was a frequent runaway and had always returned home, as she would do this time as well, albeit Jeannette would never know. Jeannette left her home angry and upset. She headed out in the direction of her friend Gail Donahue, but she never made it there. It was the last time anyone saw or heard from Jeannette again, unless a long-standing rumor is to be believed. According to some, Jeannette did not head straight to Gail Donahue's home, but instead stopped off at another friend's house, Donna Blades's. Donna lived on the same road that the abandoned quarry was located on. Allegedly, Donna and her brother had thrown a party that day, as they often did, and Jeannette overdosed and died at the home. According to this allegation, Donna's brother and his friends panicked and dumped her body on Devil's Teeth. And to add credence to this, Jeannette's sister claims that her mother always believed that the Bladeses were responsible in some way for Jeannette's death, especially when they were absent from Jeannette's funeral. For their account, Donna's parents denied this ever happened. They claimed that Donna was grounded at the time of Jeannette's disappearance and was not allowed to have any friends over, let alone have a party. If Jeannette did show up that day, which they claim she did not, she would have been promptly sent away. Ed Kish, an officer with the Springfield Police Department, was asked if there was ever any investigation into the Bladeses. He simply shook his head, no. No one questioned the Bladeses. They were a well-to-do family and dined often with local politicians as well as the chief of police. They were untouchable. Though Officer Kish doesn't believe that Jeannette would have died in the Bladeses' home. It would have been too difficult for the teens to carry the body up to the bluff on Devil's Teeth. It was too steep. In fact, when the police removed Jeannette's body from the crime scene, they had to call the local fire department to come and help lower the body down so that it could be taken to the morgue for examination. Instead, Officer Kish proposed a variation on this theory. Back then, the kids in town would hang out in the high school parking lot, and when they wanted to smoke some weed, they'd pile into the car and drive to the quarry and party there. He believes that Jeannette overdosed there and was abandoned by her friends. But if the shadow of suspicion fell on Donna's family because of their absence from Jeannette's funeral, it also befell on the DePalmas themselves for the way they acted. According to Jeannette's friends, the DePalmas seemingly had a lukewarm indifference to their daughter's death. At the funeral, Jeannette's mother claimed to be at peace with it and had already resigned herself to her daughter's death prior to her discovery at the quarry. And though no one has ever been arrested or tried for the murder of Jeannette DePalma, there has been a flurry of other suspects. In the neighborhood, there lived a teenage girl, named Liz Blood. And if that name wasn't ominous enough, Liz was a self-proclaimed witch. Liz was rumored to have forcibly recruited elementary school students to participate in an animal sacrifice in the nearby Watchung Reservation. Located in Union County, New Jersey, the Watchung Reservation has a long history of satanic activity and paranormal hauntings, and rumors had long lingered that teenagers would venture into the woods to participate in seances, witchcraft, and other satanic rituals. And as if to add some validity to this, as the investigation stalled in Jeannette's murder, the police invited a witch to the bluff's top to assist. It's believed that she provided no valuable information to further the investigation. Another suspect was a 30-year-old homeless man who lived in the woods near the quarry. Locals called him Red on account of his long red hair. When police searched the area, they found Red's abandoned campsite a mere 50 yards away from Devil's Teeth. Red had left in a hurry shortly after Jeannette's murder. He was eventually found in the next town over. Police questioned him for hours and then cleared him of the crime. Around the time that Jeannette had been reported missing, the police department had received an alarm call from a home located atop the hill. To get there, a patrolman had to drive past the quarry, and when he did, he passed a red Ford Falcon parked at the base of Devil's Teeth. It was suspicious at the time, even though Jeannette's body was weeks away from being discovered. But the patrolman didn't have time to stop. He was on a call, and by the time he returned, the car was gone, and he felt there was no need to investigate. In connection to this account, Jeannette's sister recalled that Jeannette would often hitchhike with a man that drove a red car. His name was Mike. Mike was a couple years older than Jeannette, and he was absolutely infatuated with her. So much so that it made Jeannette feel uncomfortable. There were even rumors that Mike had assaulted a few girls while in high school. It was also rumored that Mike had immersed himself in the occult and proclaimed himself to be a high warlock. But the uneasiness that Jeannette felt was not enough to dissuade her from continuing to ride with him. And after Jeannette's murder, he abruptly moved away with his mother. But probably the oddest and most prescient event to happen after the murder was when Jeannette's friend had a premonition. She dreamt of a man picking up Jeannette as she was hitchhiking. He was clean-cut, businesslike, and he drove a green Buick. The description of the green Buick would become crucial in the investigation and arrest in the murder of another young woman in Union County. 24-year-old Joan Kramer was completing her doctorate in English at Columbia University, and on the evening of Tuesday, August 15, 1972, 1 week after Jeannette's disappearance, Joan would be murdered. She had been attending a social gathering at her family's home atop the hill in South Orange, New Jersey. Sometime during the party, after an argument with her fiancé, she snuck out and walked down the hill to a local bar. After having a few drinks, she called a family friend from a payphone and told them that she would be taking a taxi home. After finishing the phone call, she stepped out into the night and approached a car, stopped at the traffic light. It was a green Buick. Joan got inside the car and was never seen alive again. 2 weeks later, on August 28th, Joan was found nude, lying face down in Union's Elizabeth River Park. The similarities to Jeannette's murder were eerie. Both girls were picked up hitchhiking. Both girls were found lying face down in a wooded area, and both girls were strangled to death. A witness would say that she saw her neighbor pick up Joan Kramer. His name was Otto Nielsen. Otto Nielsen was born October 13, 1954. He served in World War II and was married with 5 children, and he also happened to own a green Buick. After the war, Otto was considered an upstanding and well-respected member of the community, but sometime during the late 60s and early 70s, his marriage began to deteriorate and he began to drink heavily. Violence became the norm in the Nielsen household, and Joan's death wouldn't be the only murder that Otto would be connected to. 6 years prior, another young woman in the neighborhood was killed by strangulation. 17-year-old Carol Anne Farino was found in the driveway with a stocking cinched tightly around her neck. She had last been seen returning home from a catechism class at Our Lady of Sorrows, a class that so happened to be taught by Otto Nielsen. As time passed and Otto's drinking continued, his family began to suspect him of the murders. His son Neil confronted him about the murders, to which his father body slammed him into the floor, dug his knee into his chest, and throttled his throat. Otto was arrested and reprimanded to a psychiatric ward for 15 days. 2 days after Otto's release from the psychiatric ward, 2 more young women would go missing.
It's an unsolved double homicide from over 40 years ago that's never really been close to being solved, but could it have been the work of an active serial killer at the time? Now, 2 best friends, 17-year-old Mary Ann Pryor and 16-year-old Lorraine Kelly, they planned to take a bus near their North Bergen homes up to the Garden State Plaza. The girls never returned home. The 2 girls were found dead, beaten and sexually abused, face down in a wooden area behind an apartment complex called the Ridgemont Gardens in Montvale, New Jersey.
On August 9, 1974, in Bergen, New Jersey, 17-year-old Mary Ann Pryor and 16-year-old Lorraine Marie Kelly were reported missing after not returning home from a trip to the Garden State Plaza Mall that afternoon. After a waitress came forward and claimed to have seen the 2 girls the following morning eating breakfast at her diner, the police labeled Mary Ann and Lorraine as runaways. This, sadly, would not be the case. Mary Ann and Lorraine would soon be discovered on a hillside outside of an apartment complex in Montvale, New Jersey. They were both nude, each had a rope tied around their necks, and they both had cigarette burns on their bodies and Coke bottles inserted into their vaginas. Marks on their ankles and wrists indicated that they had been tied up prior to the murder and had been suffocated to death. Suspicion, of course, fell on Otto, but in 2021, torso killer Richard Cottingham confessed to the murders. Richard Cottingham was an insurance salesman turned serial rapist turned serial killer. On January 10, 1975, Otto Nielsen was arrested for the murder of Joan Kramer, but he was ultimately found not guilty at trial. In 1976, Otto barged into the local VA hospital and took 2 doctors hostage because he believed that they were responsible for keeping him away from his children. He was ultimately arrested and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and was hospitalized. He died in 1992. No one has ever been convicted of the murders of Jeannette DePalma nor Joan Kramer. In researching this episode, we relied on the articles from the New York Times and the book Death at Devil's Teeth by James Pollock and Mark Moran, as well as the documentary Out There, Crimes of the Paranormal, Episode 4, Jersey Witch Hunt. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Ritual Rewind. I'm looking to grow this podcast, so if you like it, please rate it and review it. If you're listening to this on YouTube, give it a like and a comment. And as always, you can interact with us at the Ritual Rewind on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And as this is a podcast about when cassette culture met cult culture, please stay tuned for this week's movie pairing after this short break.